Why was a Mexican American gunned down by a police officer in 1975? Was it because he didn't deliver the cow that he sold the police chief's friend on time? Or did it have something to do with the color of his skin? His family has lived on American soil for nearly 400 years. Why was Richard Morales killed? Richard Morales was born on November 18th, 1947, to Miguel and Estella Morales in the San Antonio, Texas area. He was part of a big family of 9 kids, 8 boys, and one cherished sister named Linda. Richard's family were farmers and ranchers, and the children learned how to work at a really young age. All of the boys worked as ranch hands in the community, and the entire family took pride in their accomplishments. They're honest citizens who honored their country, America. By some, they were called mojada or wetback. The comment wasn't made because the commenter felt like they were illegal immigrants. It was simply a racial statement. The local police chief, Frank Hayes, knew Richard was legal, yet he continued to harass Richard on a constant basis because he was of Mexican descent. Now, that's according to his family and those who grew up around him. Listen as Richard's brothers describe him and the way things were at that particular time in their lives.
And of course, Richard, we were born and raised here, and Richard worked for just about all the farmers there in Castro. He was a plow guy, the guy that planted corn, planted anything. He was a farmer for them, and a lot of those people came up front, saying like, what, that shouldn't have happened to Richard. He was a good guy. He might have been, not a giving angel.
We got in trouble when we were growing up, but not that, teenager stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Just not super criminals or anything like that, but they would do, like Mom said, they were no angels, but they were my kids, and I could tell you when they would do wrong and when they would do right. Mom was, always telling us, no, don't do this, and then a lot of friends would just look at us and they would look. I mean, tall brothers and muscular brothers. I mean, no giveaways, and I mean, people would come up to us and say, "Man, you're all a big family. You haven't killed him?" I said, "No, my mom says not to do that." So we were kind of like, we paid attention a lot to Mom. So when she said something, we wouldn't do it. And then,
Yeah, because some say he was a bad guy. He wasn't a bad guy. He was a teenager. He was 2 years older than I was. I knew him. Oh, we used to get drunk together like teenagers. He used to have a big old Chrysler station wagon. Call it the doodle wagon. And he would get drunk as heck, and he would come to my house while I was staying because I was already married. He'd park there, and next day I see him laying under the ground. That was Richard. That's the way he was. I mean,
I like to drink, and
he wasn't a real troublemaker. He wasn't a saint either, but he wasn't a thief. He didn't steal from nobody, nothing like that.
One thing he had for sure was that he was called a boxer. He was thinner than Ben, but there was people that would challenge him to box. He said, fist on fist. He says, come on, and he'd take them. Knock them out. I mean, he was good. I mean, he was strong bone, and he would do that. Wetback, mojao or wetback.
Yeah, wetback.
The Morales family is an antithesis of the slang and derogatory team of Mojada. They've lived on American soil since before America even became America. Richard's brothers served in the military. They fought in foreign conflicts such as the Vietnam War. They are heroes and contributors to the fabric of this country that we all are so proud of. Now, Richard Morales was only 26 years old when he was murdered. He had been married to a little girl named Maria for a short time, and they lived in modest circumstances as they tried to put their life together. He worked odd jobs, including ranching and farming. He was known by almost every landowner. He was an expert at planting crops and plowing fields, and he did so for most of them. Now, just before he was killed, Richard sold 2 cows to a man in town. He was paid in advance for the purchase, and he promised to deliver the cattle within a few days. He didn't hold up his end of the bargain, so the jilted buyer contacted the local police chief, a man named Frank Hayes. Let's listen as Ricardo's brothers recount the incident about the cattle sell.
He
Yes,
sold.
that is.
I know the rancher. He sold the calf to him, and Richard promised him because he knew Richard. I'll bring it to you a couple of days later. So a couple of days later came up, and the calf didn't show up. Richard hadn't gone to go pick it up. It wasn't that he wasn't going to deliver; just he didn't have time. He was trying to work at the same time.
You see, Richard Morales also made mistakes, just like many young people. From time to time, he would drink too much. Sometimes his drinking would lead to fighting. His mother, Estella, would say when talking about her boys that they aren't angels, but they're mine. Well, Chief Frank Hayes was a veteran of the U.S. Army and, by some accounts, a respected lawman in the San Antonio area. He was experienced and was known for surviving a shootout with a robbery suspect just 2 years earlier. The suspect in that case was Latino as well, and Hayes shot and killed the man in a gun battle that would also kill a 7-month-old child and seriously wound her 20-year-old mother, who were hiding inside the car that Hayes opened fire on after he was shot in the stomach and arm by the robber. 2 misdemeanor warrants were drawn out on Morales for this cow incident, and he was arrested at his home on August 7th, 1975. He was taken to the local jail, but he wasn't incarcerated because he had some sores and injuries to his leg. Back then, there were some interesting things that happened as jails tried to minimize the costs that they were experiencing. And apparently, the supervisor at the jail told deputies to release Morales, ignoring the warrant and act as if it was never executed. Well, this is really strange to me, and after further digging, I found that Morales did have an open wound to his leg. The jail didn't want to pay for the medical bills, and they opted instead to tell Morales to see a doctor and await a summons from the court on the case. Richard left a free man, and 6 days later, he sought treatment for the wound by area doctors. On August 25th, Morales received a court summons from Medina County to appear on the 2 outstanding warrants for the sale of the cows. He appeared on September 12th and was advised by the court to get an attorney and to see if they could work out repayment and restitution to the jilted owner. The court appearance should have satisfied the warrant, but somehow it remained active. And somehow Frank Hayes knew about it and managed to get physical control of the paper, the physical document, so that he could serve it again. I remember working the streets during that same period of time, and there was a procedure in place for law enforcement officers to ensure that a warrant was valid before you took someone to jail. There's a number of warrants that are sitting on a warrants list in police departments and dispatch centers all across the country. But when an officer runs a check on someone during a traffic stop or a field interrogation, the dispatch center will go to those lists and check and see if there are any outstanding warrants. When they find one, the officer's notified that there's a warrant, and usually the officer would immediately put the person in handcuffs just to secure them. Now, before actually transporting them to jail, the officer would have the dispatcher or the office confirm that the warrant actually exists. Then, with the actual warrant in hand, the officer would take the prisoner to jail and book him in for the warrant. That way, he'd have the paper protecting himself or anyone else who arrested Morales. Now, this is speculation on my part, and it's based on my own experience and, of course, things that I found online. Mainly that Hayes requested and received the warrant shortly after Morales appeared in court. It's unknown what Hayes did with the warrant or the case, but 3 weeks passed before he orders one of his officers to locate and arrest Richard Morales. Hello, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Profiling Evil Podcasts, The Murder of Ricardo Morales. I want to take a moment and thank our subscriber and now my friend, Richard Morales, who's named after his late uncle, the subject of this podcast. Without Richard's passionate email, I would have never learned about this terrible incident in history. I want to also thank Ricardo's brothers who provided interviews for this investigation. So Richard, Paul, Ben, and Alex, thank you. It is such an honor to know you all. And to Ricardo's sister, Linda, thanks for reading your mother's words at the press conference that occurred just days after Ricardo was laid to rest. I hope that you all find peace in knowing that you've kept Ricardo's story alive. I wish I could have met your mother and father, Miguel and Estella Morales. Now let's get back to the podcast. Now Morales must have sensed that Hayes was looking for him. He may have even heard that Hayes was uttering threats. His brother Ben would tell the local press that his brother felt like he was going to be killed one day, and he worried because he said the Castroville police were always stopping and harassing him. Richard's wife, Maria, said that he returned from court that day very worried. He couldn't eat or talk. Little did any of them know that his premonition would come true just 3 weeks later. It was Sunday, September 14th in 1975. Picture this. Hayes was sitting at home with his wife and his daughter, who was accompanied by her brand new fiance, a boy named Dennis Dunford, only 17 years old. I can't even begin to fathom what the conversation was going on that night, but suddenly Chief Hayes goes to the phone and calls Officer Don McCall, his newest police officer. As the two talk on the phone, the chief orders McCall to go to Morales' home and arrest him on the 2 misdemeanor warrants. Again, these are misdemeanors. He instructs McCall to call him if he's able to make the arrest. Well, Officer McCall does exactly as he's told by his boss, and he drives to Morales' residence in his patrol car. He happens to have his friend, Stephen Worthy, riding with him in his car. Worthy worked at the jail. At 10:15 p.m., McCall placed Morales under arrest, handcuffed him, and searched him. He then called the chief and told him that he'd made the arrest. Hayes instructed him to get the serial numbers from a television and a stereo in the home, sure that they were stolen items, and he instructed the officer to wait for his arrival. As the officer waited for the chief to arrive, he learned that the electronic equipment that the chief wanted searched was legally purchased from a nearby business. Morales lawfully possessed those things. Now, I want to pause long enough to interject my personal feelings in this case because I'm really troubled by a couple of things. First, was Hayes sitting around his family home bragging about his power and dominion as town chief? This is frankly what I'm envisioning in my mind. His future son-in-law sitting in the home, undoubtedly mesmerized, maybe even horrified by the verbose nature of his future father-in-law, who's ranting and raving about how Morales cheated a friend out of his money. After ordering Morales' arrest, Hayes invites his future son-in-law to accompany him as he goes to question the arrested man. As the scared and somewhat excited young man climbs into the car, Hayes turns to him and says, "Dennis, I'm going to shoot him 3 or 4 times. But don't worry, I won't get you in any trouble." Can you believe what I'm telling you? Not only has this small town chief completely lost his mind, but he's also premeditating the murder of Richard Morales. And he's either sending Dennis a clear message of who is going to be in charge the rest of his life if he does in fact marry his daughter, or that he's marrying into the family of a psychopathic personality. Well, I'd like you to hear Richard's brothers describing his arrest.
Well, it was about 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday when we called her Cuata, was Maria, his wife. called my mom and told mom, he says, they arrested Richard, and I barely had a chance to put his shoes on. And I think Frank Hayes taking him out to the back road, according to what he's been yelling and screaming at Richard. So that's when they took him from there. The deputies took him from there, and then they stopped down the road and transported Richard over to Hayes and his son-in-law.
After arriving at the Morales home, Hayes calls Morales a thieving SOB and told him numerous times that he was going to kill him as he strikes him in the stomach with his fist. Then Hayes instructs McCall to follow him as they drive several miles outside of Castroville city limits to a gravel road in a deserted area. Several stops were made along the way, and each time Hayes instructed McCall to tell Morales that Hayes was going to kill Morales if Morales didn't reveal the location of some stolen merchandise. Can you imagine this kind of intimidation and threats being put on this boy? Boy, he's 26 years old, but holy cow, how frightening that must have been. At one point, Hayes stops and then says that they need to go to a different location, saying, I don't want to do this here. Follow me. Well, Hayes leads the officers down an old dirt road known as Old Dunley Road. It's really called Old Frio Road. When the two cars reach the deserted area, Hayes instructs them to turn out their headlights, and he pulls out a double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun. He approaches Morales and strikes him in the stomach with the pointed end of the weapon. Hayes then states that he's killed one Mexican and was fixing to kill another. Hayes directs Officer McCall to remove the handcuffs from Morales and leave the area. Nervously, they comply, leaving Morales standing alone in front of Frank Hayes and a young Dennis Dunsford in the dark. Officer McCall drove his vehicle with the headlights off for about a mile and then pulled over and turned off the motor. He and his companion sat discussing the events that had just unfolded, and as they talked, they heard the sound of a gunshot coming from Hayes' location. They immediately sped back to the place they last saw Hayes and found only Hayes and his future son-in-law standing there. The deputies would later report that they looked around for Morales after Hayes told them he escaped, but they found nothing. Richard's brothers describe what happened after Hayes took custody of Richard.
And they went up to the back road, and the deputies said that they had heard a shot. So they asked Hayes, and he says, well, I had to take care of it. I killed him. So from there...
He said, I killed another Mexican.
Yeah, well, he kept telling the police officers, I done killed me one Mexican, I'm fixing to kill me another one. And he had told Richard that, so I imagine Richard was real scared because, hearing that from Hayes, And from there, it just took place as him being shot and taken away from there.
Don't have any idea why he picked him up, took him from a car. But I guess I guess he was going to kill him.
That was
in his mind, I guess, because
that was the place where McCall said the words were exchanged. That he says, "Or I already killed me one Mexican. I'm fixing to kill me another one." Pretty strong terms. That's why we say that we figured that Richard heard or saw something, was because of the words that were exchanged from Hayes to McCall. But they didn't investigate those words anymore. Other than that, they were said in the transcript. We have it where it said that and stuff, and then it didn't go any further than that. It was just hushed. The rest of the stuff was just, now we're going.
With Dennis witnessing the events as they unfolded, Hayes executed Morales with a single point-blank shotgun blast. He then instructed Dennis to help him load the body into the back of the car on the floorboards of the back seat. I mean, think about this. He forced this 17-year-old boy to help him move Morales's body, then not from the floorboards, but from the floorboards of the car to the trunk of the car, and then he had him help him stage the crime scene to hide the blood on the ground. It was at that location, a few days later, that Morales's father and his brother would find his shoe, causing them to believe that Ricardo was killed there. The actual crime scene and blood evidence was never determined officially in the reports. But by 11:30 p.m., just 75 minutes after he was arrested, Richard Morales' body and everyone who knew anything about his murder were driving back toward town. An hour later, the new deputy, Don McCall, reported the entire incident to another senior deputy named Heitzfelder. In part, he did so because Hayes had ordered him to say that Morales had escaped. I would hope that he was more motivated by the need to report this incredibly abusive use of force and this violation of this man's human rights. But regardless, McCall was told to forget about it because there was an inmate uprising, a riot going on in the Medina County Jail, and his help was needed to solve that problem. Well, back at home, Frank Hayes and a terribly shook up future son-in-law washed the floor mats of Hayes's personal vehicle, which was now being used to transport a murder victim. Once they'd cleaned up his vehicle, Hayes ordered Dennis, his wife Dorothy, her sister Alice Baldwin, and his daughter to take Morales' body to the family ranch and bury it. Not only am I blown away that this psychopathic personality would order family members to be part of his murderous plan, but I'm blown away that they would do it. The ranch was 400 miles to the east, near the Louisiana border. Apparently, Hayes had absolute control over everyone in his family, and they left within hours with the dead body in the trunk. Hayes remained in Castroville to do any needed damage control. The family drove with a body in the trunk 400 miles. On the following day, Richard Morales' family, led by his parents, began searching for Richard. They reached out to local law enforcement, which provided no answers. They contacted the local sheriff, who instructed him to contact the Texas Rangers. The Rangers took their case on and started working it. Richard's family learned where the supposed escape had occurred, and they started their own search with a lot of people helping them. It's there that Morales' father and his brother find his shoe and a pool of blood. The Moraleses report their findings, but it falls on deaf ears. Take a moment and listen as Richard's brothers describe the initial hours and days of looking for their missing son and brother.
And
What we had trouble was the highway department, was the law enforcement there. They didn't want to investigate. There was a newscaster there, Fred Lozano, and we told him what was going on with law enforcement. They said, well, let me go up to 100 and I'll start some trouble. And from there, everything started moving along.
my dad said, he was very stern and stuff. And my dad said, no, he's gone. He's not here. If it was Richard, he would have been out already. But no, he was gone. And then 5 days later, we found out that the ladies were caught up there in between Houston, I guess, and stuff. And they had the bloody shovels and bags, and they were taking them back to the place where they buried him. And sure enough, that's where he was, 400 miles away from here.
And you had a lot of people that showed up, though, huh?
We've had hundreds of people. We had people on horseback. Of course, we owned and rode horses and stuff. So we've had horses. We had airplanes. A lot of people. I can't think of all the names now, but we had hundreds of people looking. When funny, but we stood here and we could look down to the road where Shepherd and McDonald Crossroad is. And the line of the cemetery was still coming from way back there. They were not even here yet. So that's how many people we had here. It was a very large gathering for him. And like I said, you can look at these pictures.
In desperation, Morales' parents even go to Frank Hayes' home and they confront him. He tells them that Richard escaped and he doesn't know anything else. As all of this is unfolding, Texas Rangers locate Dennis Dunford, who refused to go with Hayes' wife to bury the body. Dunsford provides a complete statement to what happened, and he and Hayes are then arrested for the murder of Richard Morales. It would take another day before Texas Rangers would find Hayes' wife and arrest her. She had already successfully buried Richard Morales' body on the family ranch. When Dorothy Hayes and Alice Baldwin are located, their vehicle was stopped by a Texas state trooper who indicated he could smell rotting flesh when he approached the vehicle. Mrs. Hayes reportedly didn't say anything, said she didn't know anything about Richard Morales, but then she changed her story and led investigators to the shallow grave on her brother's ranch in Carthage, Texas. She would explain that her sister Alice shouldn't be held to the same standard because she was so traumatized by having a dead body in the trunk that she couldn't even help bury the victim. Can you imagine saying that? Well, Richard's body was exhumed and delivered to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. And finally, Richard's family started seeing progress in the case, not only including the arrest of Frank Hayes, but the return of Richard. Let's listen in.
Yeah.
To find Richard.
I think when Mom contacted the, he was a state trooper in San Antonio, that Mom knew him very well.
Yeah, he was a Texas Ranger.
Texas Ranger. Mm-hmm.
What's his name?
Tony Moreno or something like that.
Yeah, Tony Moreno. He was a Texas Ranger. He helped Mom too.
Yeah, Mom contacted him, and he started digging into it, and that's when.
By then, Hayes was in custody already.
Yeah, he was in custody and let go.
And, I didn't find out until the next morning, and I went over there. I went inside the house. She was crying and stuff. My brothers was there, my oldest brothers. I said, well, let's go to Hondo. Let's see what the heck's going on. So we did go up there, and my car was sitting in the front office, and he asked me, what do y'all want? I said, we're looking for information from my brother, Richard Morales. At that time, they were bringing Hayes down the quarter, and that's the first time I ever saw Hayes.
I'd seen him 2 or 3 times during that time. They were questioning him and stuff like that, and we were told that he was going to be released because they had already charged him with attempted, I believe it was attempted murder, and that was it. And of course, we didn't have the body then, so we were still looking for the body. Yeah. And about 5 or 6 days later was when the body was found.
But we had trouble with the law enforcement there.
It was pretty hectic. Back then the law was totally different than what it is now.
Richard's autopsy would reveal that he died from a traumatic gunshot wound at close range. The shot entered just under his left armpit, and it traveled from left to right. The shell wadding, it's a little plastic or paper plug that separates the shotgun pellets from gunpowder, was found inside of his body, consistent with being shot at close range. The injuries were so traumatic that Richard's left lung was pushed into his right chest cavity. Richard's father and brother had to provide the identification of Richard, and it was a terribly painful thing to do. Listen as his brother describes the wound to Richard and the process of identifying his body.
When they opened the body bag, I asked them, can you turn him around? I said, he'll smell because he's been dead for quite a few days. I said, that's all right, don't worry, it didn't bother me. So he did turn. My brother was, let me see, his legs were like this.
Cockeyed, yeah.
His arm was still like this. So he turned around. The shotgun shell was right here underneath his armpit, straight in. It didn't come out the other side. It just came in there. Coroner said it hit the lung and the heart and part of the other lung. They said your brother didn't feel anything. So that's good to know, but hard to imagine. And he didn't have his shoes on. He didn't have his wallet on. And his body was swollen completely. His eyes were almost popping out. Yeah. His cheeks were, busting open like that. And I said, well, that's good. Because I wanted to see his tattoo. He had a tattoo of an eagle right here. And he had a tattoo right there.
Well, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Profiling Evil Podcasts. This story has changed my life, and it's worth retelling time and again. I'd like to invite you to consider two other stories that are very personal to me. You can read about them in the book Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. It chronicles my investigation into a ritual child sexual abuse cult whose members were responsible for more than 4,000 counts of rape and sexual assault against children. The proceeds from the book are going to go toward a new children's justice center, a place where child victims can receive physical and psychological support. And you know what? I've also got another great gift idea for you. It's my book, She Knew No Fear. It's the story of pioneer Jane McKechnie Walton, who walked the American frontier barefoot as a child. She took part in the conquering of Hole in the Rock and settled the Four Corners area of the United States. She fought renegade Indians and was gunned down at a town celebration in 1891. Most importantly, she's my great-great-grandmother, and it would take 130 years for her murder to be solved. I know that's how long it took because I was fortunate enough to solve it. So I hope you'll purchase it for yourself or a friend. Remember, the holidays are rapidly approaching. You can get a signed hardbound copy of either book by visiting www.profilingevil.com or go to Amazon for paperback or ebook versions. Thanks so much for supporting us at Profiling Evil. Now, let's get back to the podcast. On December 14th, the Morales family and their friends met for a mass in memory of Richard Morales. Ricardo's widow, Maria, wanted the memorial mass in her Catholic parish at St. Louis Catholic Church in the heart of Castroville, Texas. The iconic church was actually built in 1870. It's beautiful, fashioned after other Gothic churches in rural France and throughout Western Europe. The Morales family would have preferred that the services were held at their church, Our Lady Queen of Heaven, in nearby Atascosa. It's about 12 miles east of Castroville, but the Morales family yielded to Maria, even though for them it meant returning Richard to the very community that Chief Hayes represented. The church was filled with well-wishers and friends and loved ones who gathered to support the family. Now, just the night before the funeral mass, Ricardo's brothers, father, and uncles dug his grave by hand using picks and shovels. Richard Morales was buried in the San Isidro Cemetery near cherished loved ones from the Morales family.
And back then, people used to dig their own graves. I believe you saw some pictures there. We dug his grave, and
We dug just about everybody here.
and
All the brothers dig his grave?
all the brothers dug his grave. And,
What was that like?
Oh well, I mean it's hard to bury a family member. I think.
But everybody got together, and we have family with us, and
Friends from McDonough
everybody would
teach each other.
took us
like that.
maybe
Anytime
an
there's a
hour
death.
to dig it all out.
Yeah, there was a lot of uncles,
A lot of uncles, and a lot
And
of
friends.
cousins,
friends that used to drink with him. Stuff came
Okay.
over. Yeah.
Everybody take a turn.
What an honor.
It
Yeah,
it
that
was.
was. It was.
It was it was very traditional stuff for us to dig and bury our own family members here.
Yeah, this cemetery here is a little over 200 years old.
Yeah, we got family
And,
members on that side over there that
My my mom's side of the family was here first, and all those brownstones, there used to be a whole bunch of them.
His parents would remark, as so many others have, that children shouldn't be buried before their parents. Well, as the family was mourning Ricardo's death, the court system in Texas was starting their proceedings against those who played a part in the murder and concealment of evidence of Richard Morales. Hayes and Dennis Dunsford were charged with murder. Now, Hayes complained of gastrointestinal disorders, so the jail allowed him to remain in the Wilford Hall Public Hospital, where he was free to roam unfettered. Dunsford's charge was changed to concealing physical evidence, and he and Mrs. Hayes were charged with the same crime. Both were released while they awaited trial. The family had so many unanswered questions, some that remain today. They still wonder what the motive was for this murder. Did Hayes truly plan to kill Morales as suggested by his comments to his future son in law, or the comments that he made to other officers on the scene? Was this all a big scare tactic that went horribly wrong? Why would his wife, her sister, and his daughter and boyfriend be compelled to help him dispose of a body? Listen as Richard's brothers share a few of their questions that still remain unanswered.
Like, where's his other shoe? Where's his wallet? Why, if you were shot with a shotgun, I mean, there'd be more blood than a little stain. There wasn't no trail going to the cars when they picked up his body and put him in the trunk. There was no blood there. So that tells me, something's going on there. And then, who helped Hayes pick him up and put him in the trunk?
Motives and stuff like that people would ask us about. And of course, the only one that we could talk about was the calves that he was reporting him about. And of course, for not transferring the calf, it wasn't that big of a case. It was just a misdemeanor. That's what I've heard that has happened. So
3 days after Richard was buried, his family held a press conference to talk about his death, the treatment that they had received, and the cover-up Chief Hayes and others participated in. Richard's mother, Estella, took a commanding lead in the family that frankly wanted revenge. She said that the entire affair needed to be left in God's hands. Let's listen as Paul shares his mother's instruction to the family.
that's why, Mom would say, just let the Lord take care of it. Who has been involved is going to be taken care of. And she held a strong bone to us, and said, this is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it.
Mrs. Morales was reserved and quiet, yet she took a commanding role when the family needed it most. She taught them that they needed to trust that goodness can prevail, and that they, as a family, need to be good examples in their community. She made a beautiful statement that I've asked her only daughter, Linda, to read. Listen closely as Linda speaks the words that her mother spoke to the community and the world at that press conference in 1975, just 3 days after burying her son. Linda's voice is much like her mother's, and if you close your eyes, you can visualize that very difficult day.
We want to thank all you people for the understanding and concern you have shown our family during this, our greatest moment of need. We come to you with great sorrow and grief, but we come also with hope for the future. Nothing that can be done will bring back our beloved son, Ricardo Morales. He is gone forever. But those of us who stay behind can do something and that is why we are here today. Help us to renew our faith in the system of justice. Let us seek out the truth, lest we all perish. Help us to show the world that justice can, will, and must prevail. Help us to believe that all men are truly created equal and that justice befalls those who do justice. Help us to renew our faith in each other and in our fellow human beings, that we may all live in harmony with each other. We believe in the ideals of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the right of dissent. But if we must protest, let the loudest clamor come from within the halls of justice. Help us to preserve law and order and assist us in allowing justice to run its course. We neither condone nor condemn demonstrations, but if we must demonstrate, let us do it in the name and for the sake of peace and harmony among all people. Instead, help us to unite those energies and to direct them towards achieving equality before the law for all people. Allow the law enforcement personnel and the court system the opportunity to function in our behalf. Let no more blood be shed in the name of our beloved Son, for we, as parents, know all too well the agony and pain of his loss, and it is our deepest desire to help some other parents somewhere to avoid the pain that we now live with. Help us to make sure that our son's death was not in vain, and that in his passing, he gave each and every one of us a new resolve and a hope for the future. Mike and Estella Morales.
While the Morales family took the high road, the courts in Texas took what I'd consider to be the low road, delivering one of the most painful blows to the family. Frank Hayes was found guilty of a lesser included offense of aggravated assault, not murder. He received a paltry 2 to 10 year sentence. His wife was sentenced to 1 year probation and fined $49.50 for court costs. I haven't been able to find what happened to Dunsford. Now, it would take several years, but the family didn't stop in their pursuit of justice. Gratefully, Latino leaders approached the U.S. Department of Justice, hoping that they would look into the case as part of their focus on human rights. The Justice Department took the case on, and NBC News provided this review on September 13th, 1976, that I thought was worth listening to. So let's listen to that report by George Lewis, NBC reporter.
Chicano leaders in a small Texas town charge angrily that in recent years, when blacks were abused by the local whites, Washington intervened rapidly. But when a Mexican American was killed by a Texas sheriff, they say, the Justice Department did nothing for 11 months, while the sheriff, as they see it, got a light sentence. Justice finally did decide to look into it. Our special for this evening from Castroville, Texas, and George Lewis.
A year ago, nobody had heard of Richard Morales. He was a poor 26-year-old construction worker who was out of a job much of the time. One of many poor Mexican Americans living in Castroville, Texas, a small town of 2,000 located southwest of San Antonio. Last year, the Castroville police chief, Frank Hayes, ordered the arrest of Morales. The charge: that Morales had sold a calf to another man and had failed to deliver it. Hardly a major crime. The man who was then Hayes' deputy, Don McCall, made the arrest. A friend, part-time jail guard Steve Worthy, rode along in the police car. They went to the shack where Morales lived and handcuffed him. Then, as Steve Worthy tells it, Chief Hayes showed up unexpectedly and began to threaten Morales.
The first thing that Chief Hayes did was kind of shove Richard, push him gently, not very, rough with him though. But he said, "Richard, you're a thief and son of a... I'm gonna kill you."
Instead of taking Morales to jail, Chief Hayes had the men drive out this road 5 miles west of town. In a deserted spot, Chief Hayes stopped, ordered Morales out of the car, and ordered the handcuffs removed.
As Don was attempting to get the cuffs off, Chief Hayes jabbed Morales with a shotgun and told Don, he said, "Mac, I've killed me one Mexican, I'm going to kill me another."
Neither Steve Worthy nor Deputy Don McCall had witnessed the killing. At gunpoint, they had been told to leave. They were in their police car when they heard a shot.
I got out of the police car and I said, "Now, Frank, where's Richard? He's not in the car. Where is he?" I was very concerned for Richard. And I said, "Now, what happened?" And Frank says, "Well, I'll tell you." He says, "Don," he says, "I killed him."
The red fence post marks the spot where Morales was killed, but his body was never found here. It was found 400 miles away, buried near the East Texas town of Carthage. The body had been moved and buried by Chief Hayes' wife, her sister, and her daughter. At the murder trial which followed, Hayes testified the shooting was a mistake, an accident. The verdict came 3 days later. Hayes was found guilty of a lesser offense, aggravated assault, and sentenced to a prison term of 2 to 10 years. Mrs. Hayes was found guilty of tampering with evidence, a misdemeanor. She was placed on probation and fined $49.50 in court costs. No one else involved in the case was tried. The verdict enraged a number of Mexican-American groups and led to a series of demonstrations. The demonstrators called the trial a whitewash. They charged this was typical of Texas justice, that over the years lawmen have gotten away with murder in the gunning down of numerous Mexican-American youths. And they claim Mexican-Americans are being denied equal justice under the law.
If you're in the custody of a policeman and you kill him, for some reason or other, you face two extremes, life or death. But if it's the other way around, more often than not, he faces involuntary manslaughter or whatever. Now, if that's not double standard, I don't know what double standard is.
Several Mexican-American leaders are urging the Justice Department to intervene in the Morales case. They argue that Chief Hayes should be indicted by a federal grand jury for violating Richard Morales' civil rights. At first, the Justice Department said the case was closed. But under heavy pressure from Mexican-American groups, and after a meeting with their representatives, the department's Civil Rights Division has agreed to investigate the Morales case. Richard Morales is buried in a remote little graveyard overgrown by weeds. A forgotten place. But a lot of Mexican Americans have resolved that Richard Morales will not be forgotten, because to them, his death represents a kind of injustice that they have fought for years to overcome. George Lewis, NBC News, Medina County, Texas.
Just a few months later, on February 23, 1977, a federal grand jury returned a 2-count indictment charging Frank Hayes with depriving Richard Morales of the right to liberty without due process of law. His wife and sister-in-law were charged with being accessories after the fact. Frank Hayes tried to state that he was incompetent to stand trial, but the court eventually disagreed, and he was forced to face a trial. The federal jury returned 3 verdicts of guilty against all 3 defendants. Frank Hayes was sentenced to life in prison, where he died. Dorothy Hayes and Alice Baldwin were sentenced and later paroled. This is a heart-wrenching case, and I want to thank Richard Morales II for bringing this case to our attention. He's a Profiling Evil subscriber, and I would have never had the opportunity to meet him or his family had he not called and talked to me about this case. Those who have honorably worn a badge in defense of others are not willing to hide criminal behavior just because it might make criminal cops look bad. They were bad. They criminally took the life of another person, a citizen that they'd sworn to protect. We have to acknowledge these kinds of things and learn from them. I believe we have. I believe in this case we have. Policing in America is constantly evolving and, for the most part, getting better. Some organizations and political bodies are fighting and pushing budget cuts and demanding reduction in law enforcement's authority. I think it is a mistake to do this, but it isn't a mistake to call out bad behavior and then become better. Richard Morales II was named after a beloved uncle, a man he never knew, a man who had rough edges, who broke the law in some areas. But he wasn't a man who deserved to be executed on a lonely dirt road. He deserved due process, and he deserved the chance to rectify the mistakes he was making. Well, young Richard II is going to carry on the legacy of his brothers, his uncles, and his parents that they've instilled in him to keep Richard Morales' story alive. This family doesn't want revenge. They simply want justice and change. They want the world to be a better place for the next generation. I, for one, think the price they paid for that privilege was way too high. And Richard Morales' story is worthy of our time. I hope you'll pass on this story to everyone that you know. Take a minute and listen as young Richard's family talks about how important this story is to them and how honored Richard should be to carry on his uncle's name.
Well, that's good. I hope he keeps going on this thing, because I never let it go. I ask questions all the time. Won't let it go. If I die, he's next. He can still keep on going, because there's a lot of family members that didn't know about their uncles or cousins, and we want them to know what happened to their uncle and cousin.
I think it was real touching of my brother Ernest and his wife. They let Mom have him and adopt him, because they saw what Mom was going through there. They saw the
eased the pain a little bit.
She was in a lot of pain, and
Yeah,
I hope that Richard has taken it to his heart, saying, you know what, Mom and Dad love me, and my brothers, they love me, and I know that my own brothers, Peanut, Chach, Wedo, and all them, I know that they love him for what he's done, for what he is. I think it was a big honor for him to be named after Richard. I hope that's the way he takes it, because it's that was Mom's way of saying, you know what, I haven't forgotten Richard. So here's how it's going to go.
Yeah, Richard was Mom's favorite boy.
Yeah.
So Richard, all this started with you. You were named after your uncle.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what that's meant to you and what this little chat we're having today means to you and your family.
A lot of it's hard for me to hear. And I was born a couple months after everything. But just hearing it's just hard. It's just, a lot of, like everybody says, there's a lot of questions that went unanswered then. I'd like to get some answers to some of those questions. Just like some a little more closure than what we had. And just know the real truth, what actually happened and why.
Yeah.
A mystery, a real good mystery.
Pretty sure he is. Mom and Dad too.
I think they would be very happy, especially Mom and Dad, knowing that we haven't forgotten the graves. We're here, like I said, every month.
We were here that Sunday.
Last Sunday we were here, and we're here every time we get a chance. Birthdays or anniversaries, we're here.
Well, it's the way our mom and dad raised us. To be close to family.
We were a close,
cousins, uncles. We all used to get together at my mom's house every Easter, Christmas, something like that.
Yeah, at celebrations we were there at the house, and
all the time.
Even now, even in celebrations or getting together for a birthday here, we come here for Christmas. This is where we're at.
Yeah.
Every Christmas we're here. We haven't forgotten that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please consider subscribing to Profiling Evil on your favorite podcast platform. That way, you'll get all of our content as it's released. You can also find us at Profiling Evil on YouTube. And since we're talking about this, check out my Southeast Asia podcast, Mapping Evil with Mike King. There, you're going to hear me and award-winning journalist Tori Shepard as we explore serial predator cases in the United States and Australia. If we're half a world apart, why are our crimes so similar? Well, it's all about criminal behavior, and I think you're going to like it. Thanks again for supporting us at Profiling Evil.
The following podcast contains content of a highly graphic nature. Listener discretion is advised. The material covered is based on first-hand accounts and publicly available information.
Well, thanks for supporting Profiling Evil in our efforts to shed light on this most difficult case. I can't thank subscriber and family member and now my friend Richard Morales enough for sharing this story. Because of him and the entire Morales family, the story of Richard will continue on. I hope that you'll take a moment, hit that like and the subscribe button, and ring that bell so that you get all of our notifications on videos like this one. I hope that we never forget the counsel that Estella Morales, Richard's mother, gave the world at a press conference. I hope that we truly become a planet where all mankind is created and treated as equals. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.